Harrington Correctional was unlike any other prison. It sat isolated on a jagged island far off the coast, surrounded by open sea and sharp reef. No roads, no neighbors, no escape. For those sent there, it was the end of the line, a fortress carved into rock, designed to hold what the world wanted to forget. Its walls towered twice the federal standard. Surveillance never blinked. Infrared cameras watched every hallway. Steel doors locked with retinal scans and magnetic codes. Inmates were counted 3 times a day. Every movement tracked, every sound recorded. In a place like this, even a bird would struggle to slip away, let alone a woman locked in solitary confinement and labeled mentally unstable. And yet, she vanished. One stormy night, during a power fluctuation caused by lightning, Marina Blake, 24 years old, was discovered missing from her cell. The door was locked from the outside. The cameras glitched. There were no signs of violence, no broken grates, no blood, no trail. It was as if she had evaporated into thin air. Alarms blared across the island. Helicopters scrambled overhead. Patrol boats circled the coast. Tactical teams swept through every shaft, every tunnel, every blind corner of the facility. For nearly a month, Marina was the most wanted escapee in the system. But no trace was found, no body, no clue. Eventually, they stopped looking, quietly, coldly. They said she must have jumped into the ocean and been torn apart by sharks, that her body would never be recovered. The file was closed, her name erased. Until 1 year later, a surprise federal renovation order was issued, aimed at reinforcing the prison's security and preventing another escape like Marina's. During early demolition of the eastern wing in G Block, contractors broke through a solid concrete wall and hit something strange. Not wiring, not pipe, just hollow space. A hidden cavity, small, silent. And inside that cavity, curled in the fetal position, was a skeleton. The remains were dressed in a torn orange jumpsuit. No identification, no wallet, just bones. At first, no one could say who it was or how they had gotten there. But caught in the torn fabric near the collar, there was a plastic inmate tag, scratched, faded, but still legible. It read, Marina Blake. She never escaped. She never even left the prison. She had been there the whole time, buried alive, behind a wall no one was supposed to touch. No one had heard her scream. No one had come searching, and no one had asked, until it was far too late. One stormy night, during a power fluctuation caused by lightning, Marina Blake, 24 years old, was discovered missing from her cell. The door was locked from the outside. The cameras glitched. There were no signs of violence, no broken grates, no blood, no trail. It was as if she had evaporated into thin air. Alarms blared across the island. Helicopters scrambled overhead. Patrol boats circled the coast. Tactical teams swept through every shaft, every tunnel, every blind corner of the facility. For nearly a month, Marina was the most wanted escapee in the system. But no trace was found, no body, no clue. Eventually, they stopped looking, quietly, coldly. They said she must have jumped into the ocean and been torn apart by sharks, that her body would never be recovered. The file was closed, her name erased. Until 1 year later, a surprise federal renovation order was issued, aimed at reinforcing the prison's security and preventing another escape like Marina's. During early demolition of the eastern wing in G Block, contractors broke through a solid concrete wall and hit something strange. Not wiring, not pipe, just hollow space. A hidden cavity, small, silent. And inside that cavity, curled in the fetal position, was a skeleton. The remains were dressed in a torn orange jumpsuit. No identification, no wallet, just bones. At first, no one could say who it was, or how they had gotten there. But caught in the torn fabric near the collar, there was a plastic inmate tag, scratched, faded, but still legible. It read, Marina Blake. She never escaped. She never even left the prison. She had been there the whole time, buried alive, behind a wall no one was supposed to touch. No one had heard her scream. No one had come searching, and no one had asked, until it was far too late. But what no one outside the prison knew, not even the feds who wrote off her case, was this. Marina Blake had never belonged in solitary confinement. Not really. She wasn't mentally unstable. She was dangerous only because she had heard something she wasn't supposed to hear. A whisper through a vent shaft. A voice at the wrong hour. A truth that could collapse the whole prison from the inside out. And, for that, she had to disappear. The discovery began like most bureaucratic repairs do, with a maintenance request buried under 2 months of paperwork. The east corridor of G Block had reported damp walls and rusted joints. On the surface, it was nothing unusual. Harrington was old. Decay was part of its bones. A federal renovation order had recently been approved as part of routine structural maintenance. Contractors arrived early, heavy boots echoing against the concrete, armed with jackhammers, drills, and diagrams that barely matched the real layout. By 10:42 a.m., they had punched through 3 layers of concrete along the east-facing wall. That's when the drill hit nothing. No resistance. Just air. It shouldn't have been there. The wall was supposed to be solid. Blueprints showed no gap, no conduit, no crawl space, no purpose. Yet behind that section of concrete was a sealed cavity, no door, no vent, no recorded access, a man-sized void where there should have been stone. Flashlights went in first. Then one of the workers screamed. Curled in the dark, fetal and still, was a body. Or what remained of one. Torn orange fabric clung to skeletal limbs. The jaw had dropped open, teeth exposed in a hollow expression of silent terror. Hair long, dark, matted, coiled around the neck like a shroud. The position of the bones told the whole story. This person hadn't been placed there. They had fought. And they had died alone. Security sealed off the corridor within minutes. No one spoke. Radios went quiet. By noon, a forensic team was flown in by helicopter under federal order. The scene was ruled sensitive. Access limited to senior officials only. Warden Keller stood over the opening and didn't move for a long time. The technician crouched beside the remains, flashlight trembling in his grip. Then he saw it wedged beneath the ribcage, tangled in cloth. A plastic ID tag. Faded, cracked, but still readable. Blake, M., inmate 213. Keller turned away. He didn't want the staff to see his face. Because the girl everyone had stopped looking for, the girl they claimed had drowned in the sea, had been right there, rotting behind their walls for an entire year. And someone had put her there. By evening, Internal Affairs had launched a limited internal inquiry, but no one said the word murder. Not yet. The official phrasing was structural irregularity resulting in undiscovered remains. But that changed quickly once the autopsy began. The forensic pathologist, Dr. Ramona Ellis, documented every inch of the remains. No shattered bones, no sign of blunt force trauma, but the fingernails were broken, jagged, worn down to the quick, and the inside of the cavity's concrete bore faint, desperate scratches. She had tried to claw her way out. The hyoid bone in her neck partially displaced. The lungs collapsed. No air, no exit, no mercy. But more disturbing than the cause of death was the fact that no one ever reported hearing her scream. Because no one had even looked. She was already labeled a ghost with a pulse, someone too unstable to be trusted, a number, not a person. When she vanished, people moved on because they were told to. But now, the lie had a skeleton. Keller spent the night in his office, reviewing every document connected to Marina's case, her intake forms, her mental evaluations, her disciplinary record. Everything looked clean. Too clean. The medical notes had no doctor's signature, the grievance log had been wiped, and the transfer request to move her into solitary had only one approving name, not two, as required by regulation. Charles Harlan. Keller's hand froze above the page. Harlan hadn't worked at Harrington in nearly 5 years. He had resigned quietly, left no forwarding address, and disappeared into early retirement. So why was his signature on a form filed less than a month before Marina vanished? Keller leaned back in his chair, stomach turning. Whatever this was, it didn't start with Marina. And if she had been buried alive to keep something quiet, the real story was still sealed behind another wall. Eliza Tran wasn't supposed to be important. She was 28, quiet, and new recently transferred to Harrington as a digital archivist. Her job was simple scan decades of old paper files, digitize them, and upload them to the central system for redundancy. She had no authority, no access to internal affairs, no clearance for classified personnel records. She wore plain clothes, brought her own lunch, and sat in the windowless records room beneath the admin wing. And maybe that's why no one noticed her. Which was a mistake. Because Eliza noticed everything. 3 days after Marina's remains were discovered, Eliza was tasked with uploading old structural plans from the last renovation cycle. There were hundreds of them: blueprints, memos, stamped approvals. Most were routine. Until she found 2 versions of the same floor plan, both marked with the same revision date. But they didn't match. Version A included a sealed maintenance corridor between G Block and the lower utility wing, a narrow space no longer in use marked Phase 2 structural integration. Version B had no such space. Same date, same architect, same approval stamp. Only one showed the corridor, the other erased it. The strange part, both were signed off by the same name. See? Harlan. Charles Harlan. Eliza frowned. She searched the staff database. No one by that name currently worked at Harrington. She checked the retirement list. Nothing. She ran his ID through the federal contractor registry. Finally, a hit. Charles Harlan, former structural operations supervisor, assigned to Harrington 2015-2017, resigned without exit interview. No phone number, no forwarding address. But something about the revision note kept nagging at her. Redundancy eliminated. Why would a reinforced corridor, one that had already been approved and constructed, be removed from the official record? She looked at the dates again, and her blood ran cold. The corridor had been built less than 2 weeks before Marina was transferred to solitary. Eliza didn't sleep that night. She stayed late in the archive room, pulling every document tied to that corridor: work orders, badge logs, supply receipts, and there, buried in a scan of a handwritten access log from 2016, she found something no one else had looked for. An entry for the East Corridor, time 2, 12 a.m., access granted to 2 people, C. Harlan and L. McKay. Landon McKay. The same officer who filed the 2:03 a.m. bed check report claiming Marina was asleep in her cell just hours before she vanished. Her fingers trembled. She checked the digital logs for McKay's badge. 14 entries. All into that corridor. All between midnight and 3 a.m. All within the month Marina disappeared. There were no accompanying work orders, no maintenance tickets, no security clearance requests. He hadn't been checking anything. He had been going back, and no one had noticed. The next morning, Eliza printed everything: the badge logs, the blueprints, the conflict between revisions, and slid them into a nondescript manila folder. She didn't upload it, didn't save it to the internal server. Instead, she waited until Warden Keller's office door was unlocked and slipped the folder inside. No name, no note, just evidence. Let the paper speak for itself. When Keller found the folder hours later, he read it alone behind locked doors, under fluorescent lights that buzzed like wasps. Every page tightened something in his chest. The logs, the names, the signatures. Harlan, McKay, the East Corridor. He had already known Marina had been murdered. But now he understood something worse. It wasn't spontaneous. It wasn't rage. It was engineered. Marina hadn't been silenced because she was mentally unwell. She had been selected, marked, eliminated. And the man who carried out the task still worked nights, still walked those same halls, still wore a badge. And if Keller wanted to know the truth, the full truth, there was only one person who could give it to him. Warden Keller waited until after the last bed check. G Block was quiet. The air hung heavier than usual, like the building itself was holding its breath. At 2:17 a.m., he summoned Officer Landon McKay to his office. No warning, no preamble. Just a 2-word message over the radio: my office. McKay didn't ask questions. He never did. When he entered, the door closed behind him with a finality that echoed too loud for such a quiet room. Keller sat alone at his desk, a folder placed neatly in front of him. The only other object on the table was a photograph. McKay glanced at it, then looked away. Keller didn't speak for a long time. He studied McKay the way one might study a dying animal, not out of pity, but calculation. Finally, he slid this folder forward. Badge logs, floor plans, signatures, access times, conflicts. McKay stared at the pages, unmoved. Then Keller leaned in. Why was she in that wall? McKay's jaw tensed. Don't pretend you didn't put her there, Keller said. Your name is on the logs. The corridor was closed. You accessed it 14 times. Still, McKay didn't flinch. Keller's voice dropped. Tell me what happened to Marina Blake. There was silence, the kind that rings. Then McKay spoke. His voice was low, dry. She overheard something. Keller didn't blink. What? McKay's eyes stayed on the table. She was in the infirmary, scheduled for routine checkup. I was stationed outside. She wasn't supposed to be awake, but the doctor forgot to close the side door. He paused. She heard them. Keller's breath stopped halfway. Heard what? McKay glanced at the photo on the table, a grainy shot of Marina, taken from a security camera, looking directly at Harlan's hand on her wrist, her face unreadable. Then he said it. She heard what they did to the other girl, Elena. Keller stared. McKay continued, voice flat. It wasn't an accident. Elena tried to report him. Said Harlan came into the showers. Said she wasn't the first. Said she'd go public. She vanished. Keller whispered. She was moved. McKay said, same place, same wall. Phase 2 corridor, that's where she went. Keller's knuckles tightened. And Marina, he asked. McKay nodded slowly. She told the nurse, said she heard things she wasn't supposed to, asked questions, wrote it down. She filed a report. McKay shook his head. She tried, but someone deleted it before it hit the system. After that, she got flagged. Unstable. Paranoid. The usual labels. Keller's voice cracked. So you put her in the wall. McKay didn't blink. She was supposed to be sedated, locked in for a few hours just to scare her, make her forget, make her stop. He looked up. But Harlan never came back. No one did. Keller stared at him in disbelief. She died in there. I know, McKay said. You left her. I did. Keller stood up, rage boiling beneath his skin. She was 24. She thought someone would open the door. She thought it was a mistake. She screamed herself hoarse and clawed at the walls with her bare hands. I know. Silence surged through the room like a tide. Then McKay said one final thing. She wasn't the first. She won't be the last. That night, Keller didn't sleep. He sat in the dark, reading every death certificate, every transfer slip, every disciplinary report filed under internal. And over again, the same pattern whispered beneath the paper. Women who filed complaints, women labeled delusional, women who were moved and never heard from again. The walls weren't just made of concrete. They were made of silence. And someone had mastered the art of burying both. Warden Keller had never made a call like this before. Not in all his years running Harrington. He didn't go through the Department of Corrections, didn't file an internal request, didn't speak to legal. Instead, he used a number he'd written down years ago on a torn corner of a transfer form, a number he never expected to dial. Naomi Briggs. She picked up after 3 rings. Tell me this isn't about Harrington, she said, before he could speak. Keller exhaled. I have a body behind a wall, a badged log that doesn't make sense, and a man who confessed to watching a woman die. Naomi went quiet. Then text me the flight number. I'll be there by morning. She arrived with no federal badge, no official title, and no protection. Just a satchel full of notebooks, old case files, and a mind trained to spot what the system tried to bury. Naomi Briggs wasn't like other investigators. She'd built her reputation years ago exposing a juvenile facility that had accidentally lost 3 boys in solitary. Her findings had sparked public outrage and cost her everything. She'd left the bureau, walked away from the machine. But Keller remembered one thing she'd said in a hearing: if the walls don't talk, dig. And now that's exactly what she came to do. She began with the body. The forensic report had been thorough: broken nails, crushed lungs, scratch marks on the inner concrete. Naomi asked only one question. Where was the camera? Keller shook his head. That corridor had no coverage. Because it was never supposed to exist, she murmured. She requested every blueprint from the last decade, cross-referenced badge logs, camera coverage, structural revisions, and maintenance work orders. By nightfall, she had already drawn the first conclusion. This cavity, she said, pointing at the hollow wall, was built intentionally and used more than once. Keller stared at her. You think there are more bodies? Naomi didn't answer right away. Then she said, quietly, I think Marina Blake was a mistake, a body you weren't supposed to find, which means somewhere there are others that stayed hidden. She interviewed McKay next. Not like an interrogator, like a surgeon. Her questions were sharp, clean, designed to slice through silence. He gave her everything. Not with guilt. With resignation. He told her about the doctor who forgot to close the door, how Marina overheard voices talking about Elena Voss, a former inmate who had filed sexual assault complaints against Charles Harlan, How Elena had disappeared. How Marina, terrified but determined, had tried to report what she heard. How Harlan had flagged her as unstable, had her transferred to solitary, had McKay help contain the problem. And how no one ever came back to open the wall. She screamed for hours. McKay admitted, voice flat. You could hear it echo through the pipes. The guards thought it was wind. Naomi didn't flinch. Why didn't you stop it? She wasn't my problem anymore, McKay replied. No remorse. No apology. Only fact. That night, Naomi returned to the east corridor. She stood in front of the repaired wall, eyes tracing the outline of where the cavity had once been, a sealed grave behind stone. She didn't cry. Didn't rage. She just whispered to the quiet, I hear you. Then she requested a ground-penetrating radar scan of the entire facility. Walls, floors, storage closets, sealed shafts. Everything. She knew what she was looking for. Not proof of a murder. Proof of a pattern. Because Marina Blake wasn't the beginning. And she sure as hell wasn't the end. The radar team worked in silence. Naomi stood over them in the sub-basement, beneath G-block, concrete walls, sweating pipes. The air was thick with mold and something older like guilt soaked into stone. She didn't expect results immediately. She expected layers of brick, maybe 1 or 2 voids, nothing that couldn't be explained. But at 4:11 p.m., the monitor lit up. A rectangular cavity, 5 feet wide, 7 feet tall. No ventilation, no access. Buried behind the condemned laundry wing. Naomi's chest tightened. Open it. The workers drilled carefully. No force, no collapse. They cut clean through. And when they peeled the steel plating away, the smell hit first. Then the shape. Another body. This one less decayed. A tangle of hair and bones curled beneath a twisted mattress, like the body had tried to become smaller, to vanish inside itself. Naomi crouched beside the opening. The jumpsuit was orange, torn. But the name tag on the waistband remained. Elena Voss. She remembered the name from McKay's confession, the girl who filed reports, the one Marina overheard. Now Elena was here. Welded shut. Sealed. And utterly forgotten. Naomi pulled Elena's file from the archive. What she found made her hands go numb. 3 official grievances. All filed within a 4-week span. All alleging sexual misconduct. All pointing to Charles Harlan. He followed me into the showers. He touched my shoulder and called me sweet. He threatened to transfer me somewhere no one would find me. Each report was stamped with the same word. Unfounded. The signatures gone. The audio recordings missing. And at the bottom of her file, a final note. Transferred for medical observation. That was 2 days before she disappeared. Naomi stayed up all night cross-referencing files. The pattern was undeniable. Women who filed complaints. Women labeled delusional. Women quietly removed. Some were transferred, others collapsed during transport. One was marked as suicide but had no witness report. All of them gone. No autopsy. No family contact. No funeral. Just vanished paperwork and fading names. And Marina Blake. She was the only one who tried to stop it. At 3:27 a.m., Naomi opened a hidden copy of Marina's intake file, one that hadn't been sanitized. There, in pencil, was a note buried in the margin. Inmate claims she overheard a conversation between Harlan and med staff. Believes another woman was taken. She asked for a pen. Said she would file. Then, beneath it, another line written in red ink. Flagged psychological risk. Transfer to G213. Naomi sat back, eyes burning. She imagined it now. Marina standing in line for medication. Eavesdropping by accident. Realizing what she'd heard. And deciding not to stay quiet. Then the retaliation. The label unstable. The isolation. And the wall. Dr. Ellis, the forensic pathologist, called Naomi 2 days later. The toxicology results were back. Traces of benzodiazepine's high dose in both Marina and Elena's bone marrow. Sedatives. Administered in the final hours of their lives. And in Marina's case, another horrifying detail. The remnants of bruising on her inner thighs. No fracture. No skin left. But the damage had been there before she died. Naomi closed her eyes. It wasn't just murder. It was silencing after rape. And Marina had known. She had heard the truth. She had tried to write it down. And for that, she had been buried under concrete. Naomi returned to Keller's office the next morning. She didn't wait to be invited in. She dropped a file on his desk. 5 women, all buried, all ignored, all silenced. Keller didn't speak. His face was ash. McKay wasn't working alone. Naomi said neither was Harlan. They were protected. Keller swallowed. His voice cracked. I know. Naomi leaned forward. Then help me end this. Douglas Fenton lived in a neat, quiet house on the outskirts of Scottsdale, Arizona. Trimmed hedges, fresh paint, a gray SUV parked on the driveway. From the outside, he looked like any retired government worker, a man who had stepped away from noise, from paperwork, from the past. But when Naomi Briggs knocked on his door at 7:03 a.m. unannounced, uninvited, he didn't act surprised. He opened it, looked her in the eyes, and said, "You're here about Marina." Naomi nodded. Fenton stepped aside. "Come in." They sat at a bare kitchen table. No coffee, no distractions, just silence stretching between them like barbed wire. Naomi didn't ease into it. "You knew." Fenton nodded once. "I did." "And you let it happen." "I did." No denial, no excuses, just a simple, hollow truth. Naomi kept her voice steady. "Harlan." He was the center, Fenton said quietly, but he wasn't alone. Nurses turned their backs. Officers stayed silent. File clerks adjusted records before they ever reached my desk. He paused, staring at nothing. When a woman started talking too much, started remembering details, writing them down, the machine kicked in. Labels, transfers, instability, and then she disappeared. Naomi's jaw clenched. "And you stayed quiet." Fenton didn't defend himself. He didn't raise his voice. He simply stood, walked to a low cabinet under the stairs, and returned with a thick plastic folder sealed with old tape. He laid it on the table. Naomi opened it. Inside were memos, unfiled grievance forms, rejected interviews, faded copies of logs that had been quietly deleted from the official archive. And at the very bottom, a photograph. Naomi stared, Marina Blake. Captured through a cracked door, standing outside the infirmary, shoulders tense, her face unreadable. Behind her, Charles Harlan, his hand clamped around her wrist. The angle, the grip, the stillness of Marina's posture, it told the whole story. She wasn't panicking. She was resigned. She knew no one would believe her. Naomi's voice dropped. "You sat on this?" Fenton didn't deny it. "I kept it for someone who might come one day." He met her eyes. "I couldn't save her, but maybe I can help you bury the people who buried her." Naomi flew back that night. She didn't feel victorious. She didn't feel relieved. What she felt holding that envelope, pressing it to her chest on the plane, was something colder. She wasn't investigating a broken prison anymore. She was exhuming a cemetery of silence. And someone somewhere was going to want her dead for it. Naomi didn't sleep when she got back. She walked straight from the airport into the Eastern District office of the Department of Justice and placed the folder, the real folder, not a copy, on Assistant Prosecutor Malcolm Reeves's desk. He didn't ask why she was there. He simply opened it and began reading. The photo of Marina. The erased grievance reports. The autopsy results. The list of names: 5 women, all labeled unstable, all dead, all buried where no one would ever find them. Reeves closed the folder after 20 minutes. His hands were trembling. "Are you sure this is real?" Naomi met his eyes. "I held the bones in my hand." By the end of that week, the DOJ had launched a formal investigation, quiet at first, but sweeping. Warden Keller was placed on temporary administrative leave. McKay was moved to a federal holding site under 24-hour surveillance. A judicial oversight team began reviewing all Harrington records from the past 10 years. On the surface, everything was moving. But Naomi knew better. Because justice doesn't come without resistance. And monsters don't die in daylight. They hide deeper. The first sign was a corrupted file. One of Marina's original reports, the one Naomi had scanned herself, was suddenly unreadable on the DOJ's secure server. She checked her personal copy. Gone. Wiped clean? Then it happened again. The photo of Harlan grabbing Marina. Blank. The file still existed, but the image was a black square. As if someone had scraped the truth off the screen. Then came the phone calls. At first, they were quiet. Unknown numbers. Breath on the line. Then came the messages. "You're going to ruin more than your career. Let her go. She's dead. You think the world cares about one inmate? You're next." Naomi changed her number, bought a burner, stopped answering the door at night. But the threat didn't stay digital. 3 nights later, someone broke into her apartment. They didn't take anything. They didn't touch her laptop. They didn't even open a drawer. But on the kitchen table, at the exact center, was a USB drive. No note. Just the drive, polished black, waiting. Naomi didn't plug it into her computer. She booted an old, disconnected laptop she kept for this exact reason. No Wi-Fi, no Bluetooth, no tracking. The drive contained a single video. 22 seconds. Grainy footage, a low angle, recorded from behind what looked like a supply shelf. Marina, bound to a chair. Eyes swollen, shoulders shaking. A voice off-screen male, deep, emotionless. Tsuide. You speak again, you disappear, understand. Then static. Then nothing. Naomi sat in silence, staring at the frozen frame. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just got up, took the drive, and smashed it under her heel until the plastic split in half. Then she backed up every file she had. To a cloud account no one knew existed. To a physical drive stored under her sister's name in a bank deposit box. To a sealed envelope that she mailed to a journalist in Chicago with a single instruction. If I go missing, publish this. The next day, as she crossed an intersection near her hotel, a black SUV ran a red light. It was going too fast to stop. She would have died if a garbage truck hadn't pulled into the lane at the last second, blocking the impact. The SUV swerved, tires screeched. It kept going. No plates. No cameras. No evidence. But Naomi didn't need proof. She knew what it was. It wasn't a mistake. It was a message. Stop, or don't live long enough to regret it. That night, Naomi made her decision. The courts were too slow. The system too tangled. She had spent her career believing in institutions. Now she was done waiting. She wasn't going to leak the truth. She was going to broadcast it to the entire world. Naomi didn't sleep the night before. She spent the hours finalizing her statement, fact-checking her files, cutting out every unnecessary sentence, not to protect herself, but to make sure that when she spoke, no one could look away. At exactly 8:00 a.m. on a Monday, she clicked publish. The video went live on every major platform: YouTube, X, public watchdog forums. She didn't ask for permission. She didn't wait for clearance. She sat alone in a hotel room, stared into the camera, and told the truth. My name is Naomi Briggs. I'm a former federal investigator. What I'm about to tell you isn't theory. It isn't conspiracy. It's evidence. A woman named Marina Blake was buried alive inside a federal prison. She didn't die because of mental illness. She didn't escape. She didn't drown at sea. She was murdered. Because she overheard a conversation she wasn't supposed to, because she tried to report it, because she refused to be quiet. She was sedated, walled in, and left to die screaming in the dark. Naomi laid it all out. The forensic reports, the badge logs, the doctored blueprints, the missing grievance forms, the photograph, the USB, the video. Then she named names. Charles Harlan, Landon McKay, Rebecca McKay, licensed prison medical staff, charged with falsifying toxicology reports. James Lowell, former logistics supervisor, whose badge showed silent entries to restricted areas. And Douglas Fenton, former warden, who knew and did nothing. She ended with a simple line. If you're watching this, it means they failed to stop me. But if something happens, you know what to do. The video went viral in under 6 hours. Hashtags flooded social media. Justice for Marina Meyer Harrington cover-up #, bury the buried. Mainstream media picked it up by noon. By evening, the Department of Justice held a live press briefing. A federal investigation was relaunched, not internal, not secret, public, transparent, monitored. Naomi's name was requested for congressional testimony. Families of other missing inmates came forward. One by one, they brought letters, phone records, torn photos, unexplained transfers that suddenly made horrific sense. By the end of the week, Charles Harlan was arrested in Nevada, living under a fake identity. Rebecca McKay surrendered quietly in Illinois. 3 more bodies were found behind sealed structures inside Harrington. The prison was permanently shut down. Every inch of the facility was scanned. Every file subpoenaed. Every survivor heard. Naomi declined media interviews. She didn't want a spotlight. She wanted accountability. Instead, she created a nonprofit, Unearth the Silenced, an independent coalition dedicated to tracking down erased abuse inside carceral institutions. She and her team traveled to prisons, youth detention centers, psychiatric wards asking questions, scanning sealed walls, listening where no one else would. On her desk, she kept one photo. It wasn't Marina in distress. It was Marina's intake form, age 24, hair pulled back, eyes wide, jaw set like stone. Naomi added one line beneath it in her own handwriting. She didn't disappear, they buried her, and she broke through. Sometimes justice doesn't come from within the system. Sometimes it comes from someone who won't stop digging. And sometimes, even concrete can't hold the truth forever.